The first time Angela Morris saw Tyler Brooks' profile, she was sitting alone at her kitchen table in Macon, Georgia, with a glass of Merlot and a laptop screen glowing back at her. Outside, the November rain tapped gently on the windows, and the only sound inside was the low hum of her refrigerator. At 48, Angela had told herself she was done with love, twice divorced, grown kids living their own lives, and a heart that had learned to protect itself. But sometimes, late at night, she'd find herself scrolling through dating profiles, not because she expected a miracle, but because the quiet felt too heavy. Tyler's photos stopped her in her tracks. A strong jawline, easy smile, and a body that looked like it belonged on the cover of a fitness magazine. His bio was short, just a few lines about loving the outdoors, traveling, and looking for someone real. It didn't read like the copy and paste nonsense she'd seen 100 times before. And then there was his age, 27. That alone should have been a red flag. But something about him felt different. Or maybe that's just what she told herself. She sent a quick message, half expecting he'd never respond. 5 minutes later, her phone buzzed. "Hey, Angela," beautiful smile. "How's your night?" That was the start. In the weeks that followed, their conversations became a fixture in her life. He asked about her day and actually listened. He told her about growing up in Texas, his single mom working 2 jobs to keep food on the table, how he'd started working young to help out. There was a warmth in his words, a vulnerability that made her feel like she wasn't just talking to some stranger online. She was peeling back layers of someone who truly wanted to be seen. And Tyler knew exactly what to say. On nights when her back ached from long hours at the office, he told her to rest, that she deserved someone to take care of her for once. When she mentioned her failed marriages, he said it was their loss, that any man who couldn't see her worth was blind. He was charming without being overbearing, sweet without feeling fake. The truth, that he'd built this persona piece by piece, wasn't something she could have seen then. The flattery was addictive. He'd send her photos of his day, a sweaty gym selfie, a shot of him fixing up his truck, a sunset over a Texas field. She started sending him little glimpses of her life, too. Her new haircut, the red dress she hadn't worn in years, the peach cobbler she'd baked on a Sunday afternoon. She told herself it was harmless, but she caught herself checking her phone during work meetings, waiting for his messages. Her coworkers noticed the change, the extra lipstick, the lighter step, the way she hummed to herself in the break room. Somewhere along the way, the conversations deepened. Tyler spoke about his dreams, wanting to start his own construction business, to build something that would carry his family's name. Angela found herself imagining what it might be like to be part of that future. And when he mentioned money troubles, medical bills for his mom, repairs on his truck, she didn't think twice before offering to help. The first transfer was small, just a few $100s. Then another, and another. She told herself it wasn't about the money. It was about showing she cared. Her friends were skeptical. "Angela, he's 27. One of them said over brunch. "You've never even met him in person. Just be careful." Angela laughed it off. She'd been careful her whole life, and it had gotten her nowhere but alone. Tyler made her feel wanted in a way she hadn't felt in years. That mattered more than caution. As Christmas approached, Tyler began hinting about wanting to see her face to face. "I'm not much for texting anymore," he wrote one night. "I want to hear your laugh in person. I want to hold you." Angela's heart fluttered. He suggested she come to Houston, said he'd show her his favorite places, cook for her, take her somewhere special. "You won't regret it," he promised. Angela started planning. She booked her flight, picked out outfits she thought he'd like, and even splurged on new perfume. She imagined walking through the arrival gate, seeing him waiting there with that smile, maybe even flowers. She pictured their first dinner together, something romantic, maybe candlelight. And though she never said it out loud, she hoped this trip could be the start of something real, something lasting. On the morning of her flight, Angela stood in front of the mirror, taking one last look. She'd chosen a fitted navy dress that hugged her curves just right, with a light scarf to ward off the chill. Her suitcase was neatly packed, gifts for Tyler inside, a leather wallet, a bottle of cologne, and a jar of her homemade peach preserves. She wanted to bring a piece of home to him. As she locked the door to her house, she didn't know it would be the last time. The taxi pulled away from the curb, and she leaned back in the seat, imagining the moment their eyes would meet for the first time. She thought about the stories they'd tell years from now, about how they met online, about the leap of faith she'd taken. She thought about all the lonely nights she'd spent wishing for someone to love her. She didn't think about the lies. She didn't think about how far someone would go to protect a secret. And she certainly didn't think that by the next night, her name would be flashing across news headlines. Not as a woman in love, but as a woman whose search for it ended in the worst way imaginable. From the moment Angela got back from work each evening, her phone became the center of her world. She'd drop her purse by the door, kick off her heels, and scroll straight to Tyler's messages. It didn't matter if the day had been long or dull. One little notification from him could erase every bit of exhaustion. His texts were never just, "Hey," or "What's up?" Instead, they came with thoughtfulness, like he'd been paying attention. "How was that meeting you were nervous about? You still thinking about trying that new Italian place?" It was intoxicating to feel so seen. At first, the conversation stayed light. Tyler sent her funny memes, short videos from his work site, selfies with his baseball cap pulled low over his forehead. Sometimes he'd send a quick voice note, that slow Texas drawl curling around her name like it belonged to him. Angela played along, teasing him about his accent, calling him cowboy. He called her Georgia Peach. They started talking every night, and it became routine. He was the last person she messaged before bed and the first she heard from in the morning. As weeks passed, their talks got deeper. Tyler shared about his childhood, growing up without a father, watching his mother work herself to the bone to keep food on the table. He painted himself as someone who'd had to fight for every scrap of good in life, someone who didn't take kindness for granted. He told her he'd been burned in past relationships, women who used him or lied to him. Angela, 2 divorces behind her, understood that sting all too well. Those confessions pulled her closer. She started feeling protective of him, like she was the one person who truly got him. He was careful with compliments, too. Never over the top, never so much that it felt fake. He mentioned the way her smile made him forget his troubles, or how her laugh was better than whiskey on a cold night. Sometimes she'd catch herself blushing at her desk, glancing around to make sure no one noticed. Her friends started asking why she seemed so cheerful, but Angela just shook her head and smiled. "Just good days, I guess," she'd say. The first time Tyler brought up money, it was wrapped in embarrassment. He told her his mom had been in the hospital for chest pains and that the bills were stacking up. "I hate even saying this," he wrote, "but I'm a little short this month." Angela didn't think twice. She wired him $300 and told him it was nothing, that she wanted to help. He resisted, just enough to make it seem like pride, not manipulation, before accepting and showering her with gratitude. "I'll pay you back soon, I swear. You don't know what this means to me." It didn't stop there. A week later, his truck broke down on the way to work. A few weeks after that, there was talk of a late rent payment. The amounts were never huge, and Angela rationalized it all. She'd spent more than that on shoes she never wore. Plus, he'd said he'd pay her back. But what really mattered to her wasn't the money. It was that he trusted her enough to lean on her. It made her feel necessary again. Tyler didn't just ask for help. He gave her things too, though not material ones. He gave her attention. He remembered details about her coworkers, her favorite songs, the exact way she took her coffee. If she mentioned an old memory in passing, he'd bring it up days later like it was a treasure he'd been holding on to. That kind of listening was rare, and Angela soaked it in like sunlight. By the third month of talking, they developed little rituals. She'd send him a picture of her lunch every day, no matter how boring. He'd reply with exaggerated compliments. Only you could make a turkey sandwich look gourmet. On Friday nights, they'd have wine calls, where she'd pour a glass of Merlot, he'd crack open a beer, and they'd talk for hours, sometimes until dawn for her, with her feet propped up on the coffee table and her heart floating somewhere between hope and certainty. Her friends weren't convinced. "Angela, you're falling for a guy you've never met in real life," her best friend Janine warned over coffee one Saturday. "And he's, what, 27? That's 21 years younger than you. Don't you think that's unusual?" Angela bristled at the judgment. "Love doesn't have an age limit," she said firmly. "And we're not talking about some random guy. I know him better than I've known anyone." Janine let it go, but the doubt lingered in her eyes. Tyler, for his part, played the role of the devoted long-distance boyfriend perfectly. When Angela had a bad day, he'd send her songs to cheer her up. When she mentioned feeling lonely, he'd tell her he wished he could hold her right then. And when she started doubting herself, wondering aloud if he'd ever really want to be with someone her age, he cut her off. "Age is just a number, baby. What we have is real." Those words hooked her deeper. As winter turned to spring, Tyler began planting the idea of meeting in person. At first, it was casual. "One day, I'm going to take you to my favorite spot on the bayou." But soon it became more insistent. "Why wait? We've wasted enough time already," he said one night. "I want to look you in the eyes, not a screen." Angela's heart pounded at the thought. She'd imagined that first meeting 100 times. The way he'd hug her, maybe kiss her, maybe whisper something only for her ears. They started planning. Tyler said he'd love to visit Georgia, but couldn't take much time off work and didn't have the money for a ticket. Angela offered to fly to Houston instead. He hesitated just long enough to make it seem like it was about logistics before agreeing. "It's perfect," he said. "I'll pick you up from the airport. I'll make you dinner. I'll give you the weekend of your life." From then on, their conversations were filled with little details about the trip. Tyler told her what to pack, something nice for dinner, something comfortable for a walk along the pier. He promised her a surprise, something she'd never forget. And every time she thought about it, a little thrill ran through her. This wasn't just a fling or a fantasy anymore. It was happening. Angela started preparing in earnest. She went shopping for new clothes, got her hair touched up, even treated herself to a manicure. At night, lying in bed, she'd picture him opening his door to her, pulling her into his arms. She imagined that moment sealing everything they'd built over months of late-night calls and shared secrets. She told herself she knew this man, not just his voice or his face on a screen, but his heart. What she didn't know was that Tyler's heart carried something darker. And in 12 short hours after she stepped off that plane in Houston, the dream she'd been chasing would twist into something she never saw coming. Angela woke before dawn, the soft glow of her alarm clock cutting through the darkness of her bedroom. For a moment, she just lay there, staring at the ceiling, letting the weight of the day sink in. Today wasn't just another Friday. Today was the day she'd finally meet Tyler Brooks, the man who had been filling her nights with laughter, her mornings with sweet messages, and her heart with a hope she thought she'd buried years ago. She moved around her house with a kind of purposeful calm, like each step was part of a ritual. Her suitcase was already packed from the night before, neatly organized, 2 dresses for dinner, casual jeans and tops for sightseeing, her favorite navy heels, and, tucked carefully inside a side pocket, a bottle of the perfume she hadn't worn in years. She'd spritzed it on for her first date with her second husband. Now it felt like a small charm for luck. On top of her clothes lay a small box wrapped in gold paper, inside of which was a leather wallet she'd picked out for Tyler. Beside it, a jar of her homemade peach preserves, because she wanted him to taste a little piece of Georgia. At the airport, the fluorescent lights and the chatter of travelers filled the air. Angela moved through check-in with an ease that surprised her. It felt like she'd been preparing for this moment far longer than the weeks since they'd booked the flight. As she waited at the gate, she texted Tyler, "Boarding now. Next time I text you, I'll be in Houston." He replied almost instantly, "Can't wait to see you, Georgia Peach. You're gonna love it here." She smiled at her phone, unaware that this would be one of the last messages from him that would make her heart feel light. The flight from Atlanta to Houston was just under 2 hours, but to Angela it felt suspended in a strange dream. She read a magazine without really seeing the words, her mind busy with images, Tyler waiting for her at the gate, their first hug, the way his voice would sound without the static of a phone call. She ordered a glass of wine from the flight attendant and sipped it slowly, savoring the anticipation. When the plane touched down at George Bush Intercontinental, her pulse quickened. The bustle of passengers gathering their belongings, the hum of rolling suitcases, it all blurred around her. She adjusted her scarf, ran a hand through her hair, and walked down the jet bridge with the kind of nervous excitement she hadn't felt since she was in her 20s. Tyler was standing near the arrivals area, leaning casually against a column. Angela's eyes found him instantly, but something in her gut shifted. He didn't quite look like the photos, still handsome in a rugged way, but older, a little heavier, the sharp jawline softened. His smile was there, though, and that alone steadied her. He pushed off the column and walked toward her, pulling her into a hug that was firm but brief. "You look even better in person," he said, his voice exactly as she remembered. She laughed, the tension in her shoulders easing. Still, she couldn't help but notice he kept glancing around, as if checking for something or someone. They walked to the parking garage together. Tyler had brought his pickup truck, the passenger seat cleared off except for a bottle of water and a folded flannel shirt. The drive from the airport was filled with light conversation. How the flight was, how traffic was always bad this time of day, how he'd been counting the hours until she got there. Angela kept stealing glances at him, trying to reconcile the man beside her with the man she'd been building in her mind for months. When they pulled up to his apartment complex, Angela took in the surroundings. It was modest, a little run-down, with a cracked sidewalk leading to the stairs. Inside, the place was tidy but sparsely furnished. A worn couch, a coffee table with a few beer coasters, blind half open to let in the fading afternoon light. On the kitchen counter, a single plate sat drying on a dish rack. Tyler set her suitcase in the corner and handed her the bottle of water. "You must be tired from the flight. Make yourself at home," he said. He moved around the apartment with a restless energy, like he couldn't quite decide what to do next. Angela sat on the couch, sipping her water, watching him. She reminded herself that this was just the awkwardness of meeting in person for the first time. He suggested they order takeout from a local barbecue place. They ate in front of the TV, a sports game playing in the background. Tyler asked about her kids, her job, her house back in Georgia. Every so often, his eyes would linger on her a beat too long, and she'd feel a flicker of the chemistry they'd shared online. But there was something else there too, a tension she couldn't quite name. After dinner, Angela excused herself to the bathroom. She looked in the mirror, adjusting her hair, taking in the reflection of a woman trying to balance excitement with caution. She told herself not to overthink things. First meetings were always a little strange. By tomorrow, they'd be laughing and exploring the city together, just like they planned. When she stepped back into the living room, Tyler was leaning against the counter, his arms crossed, watching her. "You look good," he said, but his tone was flatter this time, almost measured. Angela smiled, walking toward him, try to bridge the gap. She didn't know it yet, but somewhere between the airport and this moment, something had shifted in him, and the warmth she'd felt for months was about to start cooling into something far more dangerous. Angela settled back onto the couch after freshening up, tucking her legs under her and offering Tyler a warmer smile than she felt inside. She told herself it was just first meeting jitters, that maybe the awkward pauses and sideways glances were because he was nervous too. But Tyler didn't sit down right away. He stayed leaning against the kitchen counter, arms crossed, eyes flicking to her and then away, like he was running something over in his mind. "You want another drink?" he asked finally. His voice was casual, but there was something under it, something a little too sharp. "Sure," Angela said. "Water's fine." He nodded, grabbed a bottle from the fridge, and handed it to her. When their hands touched, she felt how warm his palms were, almost clammy. He dropped into the armchair opposite her, elbows on his knees, watching her in a way that made her shift in her seat. "So," he began slowly, "I guess now that we've met, you probably noticed I'm not exactly like my pictures." Angela blinked, surprised by the directness. "Well, pictures never tell the whole story. You still look like you." He laughed once, short and humorless. "Yeah, but not the way you thought I would." She hesitated, unsure where this was going. "Tyler, I didn't come here for some perfect photo. I came here for you." That should have softened him. It didn't. Instead, he leaned back, arms draped over the chair like he was testing how much space he could take up. Most women don't stick around when they figure out I'm not what they imagined. Something in the air shifted, and Angela's instincts began to prickle. She tried to keep her tone light. "What exactly am I supposed to be figuring out?" He smirked, but didn't reach his eyes. "Guess we're going to find out." "Huh?" The conversation drifted for a while, but Angela couldn't shake the uneasy feeling. Tyler seemed to be measuring her reactions, probing without asking outright. Then, after an awkward lull, he got up, turned off the TV, and walked over to stand in front of her. "Come here," he said, extending his hand. Angela took it, and he pulled her to her feet. The closeness was sudden, his presence filling the space between them. He brushed a strand of hair from her face, his fingers lingering near her cheek. For a moment, it felt almost tender, until he kissed her and she realized something was off. His lips were stiff, his body tense, as though he was performing rather than feeling. When he drew back, she tried to smile, but he was already looking away. "Let's go to the bedroom," he said. It wasn't a suggestion. Angela followed him down the short hall, heart pounding for reasons that had nothing to do with excitement. The bedroom was dim, the blinds half closed, the bed made, but with an odd stiffness, like it hadn't been slept in for days. Tyler shut the door behind them and faced her, his expression unreadable. What happened next was a blur of awkward movement. Tyler's shirt came off quickly, but when Angela reached for his belt, he froze. "Just slow down," he muttered, stepping back. She did as he asked, waiting for him to lead. But when he finally removed the rest of his clothes, the truth came at her like a slap. The body she'd imagined for months wasn't the one standing in front of her. It wasn't just weight or muscle tone. It was the one thing he'd never hinted at, never prepared her for. His body was drastically different than the images he'd sent. Angela's mind scrambled for a response, her instincts warring with her better judgment. She tried to hide the flicker of surprise on her face, but it was too late. Tyler saw it. "What?" His voice was low, dangerous. "Nothing," she said quickly. "It's just, I wasn't expecting." There it is, he cut in, his words sharp as glass. "That look, same damn look I've seen before." Angela shook her head, reaching for him in an attempt to defuse whatever was building in him. "Tyler, I don't care. Don't lie to me." His voice exploded in the small room, the sound ricocheting off the walls. He stepped closer, his height and frame suddenly oppressive. "You think I don't know what you're thinking?" You think I haven't heard the jokes before? Angela's heart was racing now. I'm not joking about anything, she said, keeping her voice as steady as she could. I came here because I like you. That hasn't changed. But it had. She could feel the change in the air, thick and heavy. Tyler's jaw clenched, his chest rising and falling faster. I knew this was a mistake, he said. I knew the second you saw me, it'd all be over. You're just like the rest of them. Angela took a cautious step back toward the door. I'm not like anyone else you've met. We can talk about this. Talk. His laugh was bitter. You came here thinking you were getting some fantasy. Now you see the truth, and you want to talk. The tension between them stretched taut, and Angela realized she needed to get out of that room. She glanced toward her phone on the nightstand, just a few feet away, but Tyler noticed and moved to block her path. Where do you think you're going? He asked, voice low now, almost a growl. I just need a minute, she said. I need some air. You don't need air, he said, stepping closer. You need to stop acting like you're better than me. I never said that, she replied, her voice shaking. Tyler, please. But he wasn't listening anymore. Whatever wound she'd touched, whether by accident or simply by existing, was wide open now, bleeding into every word, every movement. His hands flexed at his sides, his breathing ragged. Angela's instincts screamed at her to run, but there was nowhere to go without pushing past him. And in that moment, she understood something she hadn't let herself believe before. She didn't really know the man standing in front of her. She only knew the mask he'd worn for months, the version of himself he'd crafted through careful messages and borrowed images. The real Tyler was here now, and he was nothing like the dream she'd been chasing. Tyler's eyes locked on her, like a predator sizing up prey. The smile he'd worn at the airport was gone, replaced by something tight, cold, and wounded. Angela could almost see the thoughts churning behind his stare, dark memories she hadn't been invited into, but that were now steering everything in the room. He took one slow step forward, then another, until she could feel the heat radiating off his chest. You think you're the first? He said, his voice low and trembling. Not from fear, but from fury barely contained. You think I haven't seen that face before? That little flash in your eyes when you realize I'm not what you imagined. Angela kept her hands in front of her like a shield. I didn't mean. Don't, he snapped, his voice cracking like a whip. Don't you lie to me, Angela. You all do it. Smile to my face while your brain's already writing the jokes. Her heart was pounding so hard she thought he could hear it. She tried to take a small step toward the door, but his arm shot out, blocking her path. His fingers brushed her shoulder. Not a gentle touch, but a warning. I'm not laughing at you, she said, trying to keep her tone calm. I'm here, aren't I? I flew all this way because I wanted to meet you. He let out a humorless laugh. Yeah, you wanted to meet Tyler Brooks, the guy in the pictures, the guy who doesn't exist. His voice got louder with each word. And now you've met me, and you're wondering how fast you can get on a plane back to Georgia. That's not true. She could feel herself inching back again, testing the distance between them, calculating whether she could make it to the front door. Tyler moved first. His hand shot to her arm, gripping hard enough to make her gasp. Don't you walk away from me, he hissed. You don't get to judge me. You don't get to make me feel small. Tyler, please. Please. He shoved her backward toward the bed. She stumbled, catching herself on the edge of the mattress. The sudden shift from tension to physical force made her mind flash with panic. She raised her hands, palms out, trying to create space, but he was already advancing. What is this really about? She asked, her voice shaking. You're angry because I didn't react the way you wanted, but... No, he cut in sharply. I'm angry because you're just like everyone else. You pretend to care, but the second you see me, really see me, you start looking for the exit. Angela's mind raced. She thought of her phone in the bedroom, the neighbors she'd passed in the hallway, the way the deadbolt had clicked when they came in. She wasn't trapped, she told herself, but she also wasn't safe. Tyler's grip on her arm tightened, and she winced. "You think you're better than me," he said again, almost like a mantra. "You think you can just toss me aside. That's not what I—" Her words were cut off when he shoved her again, harder this time. She hit the bed frame with a dull thud, pain blooming across her back. The fear in her chest spiked, but so did something else, a quiet, steely voice telling her she needed to survive this. "Tyler, I'm not going anywhere," she tried again, her tone measured, deliberate. "I'm here because I wanted to be. I'm just surprised. That's all." He stared at her for a long moment, breathing heavy, and for a split second she thought he might calm down. But then his gaze dropped to her hands, clenched in her lap, and something in him seemed to snap. "You're lying," he whispered. "I can see it. You're waiting for your chance to run." Angela's pulse roared in her ears. "I'm not." Before she could finish, his hand shot to her throat. Not a squeeze at first, but enough to make her freeze. Her breath caught, the weight of his palm pressing into her windpipe. His face was inches from hers now, his eyes wild, jaw locked so tight she could see the muscles twitch. "You're not leaving me," he said, the words slow and deliberate, each one dripping with menace. "Not like the others." Angela clawed at his wrist, trying to pull it away, but his grip only tightened. She could feel the air thinning, her chest heaving in shallow bursts. Her vision blurred at the edges, and panic clawed at her mind. She thought of her children, of her home, of the friends who had warned her. And then, just as suddenly as he'd grabbed her, he released. She coughed, gasping for breath, her hands trembling. Tyler stepped back, running both hands through his hair like he was trying to shake something off. "I didn't want it to be like this," he said, almost to himself. "But you made me." Angela's voice was raw, barely a whisper. "I didn't make you do anything." He turned to her, eyes narrowing again. "You did. With that look, that pity." Her body screamed at her to move, but her legs felt rooted. Tyler began pacing, muttering under his breath. Words like liar, fake just like them. Each time he passed her, his shoulder brushed hers, a reminder of how easily he could close the space between them again. Finally, he stopped and looked at her like he was making a decision. "You're not going to laugh about me to your friends," he said. "You're not going to tell anyone about this." "I won't," she said quickly. "I promise. Let's just—" He lunged again, this time shoving her back onto the bed. Her head hit the headboard, a burst of pain shooting across her skull. She cried out, but the sound barely carried before his hand was at her throat again. Tighter now, the pressure unrelenting. Angela's hands flailed against his arms, nails scraping at his skin. Her lungs screamed for air, her vision dimming. She tried to kick, but he pinned her down with his weight. The last thing she saw before darkness crept in was his face, twisted, eyes blazing not just with anger, but with the kind of shame that turns lethal. And then everything went black. When Tyler finally released his grip, Angela's body lay still beneath him, her chest unmoving. He stared at her for several seconds, breathing hard, sweat dripping down his temple. The room was silent except for the pounding in his ears. He'd crossed the line there was no coming back from. He told himself it wasn't his fault, that she'd pushed him there, that she'd made him feel small. But as he looked at her, limp and motionless, another truth pressed in. He'd just killed the only person who'd ever bothered to come all this way for him. Tyler stood over Angela's body, the sound of his own breathing filling the small bedroom like a drumbeat he couldn't shut off. The reality of what he'd done began to seep in, not all at once, but in waves that made his stomach turn. Her head was tilted awkwardly against the headboard, eyes half open, lips slightly parted. For a fleeting second, he almost expected her to gasp for air, to cough, to come back. But the stillness was absolute. He backed away until his legs hit the dresser. His mind raced. Police, prison, headlines, but he shoved the thoughts aside. He needed to think. He needed to act. "It's not my fault," he muttered under his breath, like saying it enough times might make it true. "She pushed me. She made me do it." He grabbed a blanket from the bed and wrapped it around her, avoiding her face. His hand shook as he lifted her off the mattress. She felt heavier than he expected, her weight a reminder that she was no longer just a person. She was evidence. He laid her on the floor for a moment, catching his breath, then peeked through the blinds. The parking lot was quiet. A few cars sat under the dim streetlights, but no one was walking by. His first thought was the dumpster behind the building. It wasn't far, and if he went late enough, the chance of being seen would be small. But the idea of hauling her there without being spotted felt impossible. Besides, there were cameras, he knew, because they'd given him a warning once for leaving his truck parked too long in the loading zone. Instead, he dragged her into the bathroom, the blanket scraping against the tile. The sound made his skin crawl. He closed the door, turned on the shower, and sat on the toilet lid, trying to piece together a plan. The water roared in the small space, steam rising, but he wasn't really listening. He was replaying the last 10 minutes over and over, each time hearing her voice, each time feeling the moment his hands tightened and didn't let go. He needed to make it look like an accident, or maybe like she left. Yeah, maybe she just left. He could say they argued. She walked out, and he hadn't seen her since. But her suitcase was still here. Her phone was still here. Her plane ticket back to Georgia was sitting on the counter. No one would believe she just walked away without them. Tyler picked up her phone, scrolling through their messages. He typed a text to one of her friends. "Made it to Houston. Tyler's even better in person. Heading out for a drive. We'll call later." He stared at it for a moment, then deleted it. Too risky. If the police got her phone records, they'd see it came from Houston, not wherever she was supposed to be. He needed something cleaner. He thought about putting her in the trunk of his truck and driving somewhere remote, maybe out toward the bayou. But that meant leaving the apartment complex, passing under the front gate camera, and hoping no one recognized his vehicle. And the longer he waited, the more chance there was for someone to knock on the door or hear something they shouldn't. Tyler's mind snapped to bleach. He had a half-empty jug under the kitchen sink from when he cleaned up after a leak. He went to get it, setting it beside the bathroom sink. He wiped down the counters, the doorknob, even a light switch. Then he stared at the bleached jug, realizing it couldn't erase the bigger problem, the body lying 3 feet away. Hours passed in a haze of pacing, wiping, listening for noises outside. Finally, around 2 a.m., he decided. He'd put her in the bed, make it look like she'd been drinking, maybe fell, hit her head. He found a half-empty bottle of whiskey from the cabinet, poured some into a glass, and set it on the nightstand. He even dabbed a little on her shirt, the smell sharp in the air. But the story didn't make sense. The bruises on her neck would be obvious to anyone with eyes. And the bed frame, where she'd hit her head, wouldn't explain the ligature marks his fingers had left. He knew enough from TV crime shows to realize the coroner would see through it in seconds. That was when the panic truly set in. He sat on the couch, head in his hands, rocking slightly. Every plan he thought of unraveled before it even began. His thoughts kept snagging on the same problem. He couldn't make her disappear without being seen, and he couldn't make her death look natural. He was stuck. In a last-ditch move, he decided to at least get her out of sight. He wrapped her tighter in the blanket, tied it with a length of extension cord from his toolbox, and dragged her into the small storage closet off the balcony. He stacked a few boxes of old tools and paint cans in front of the door, hoping it would buy him time. The moment he slid the balcony door shut, headlights swept across the wall. He froze. A neighbor's car pulled into the spot 2 spaces down. The driver, A middle-aged man with a grocery bag glanced up toward Tyler's apartment. Their eyes met for the briefest second before the man disappeared inside. Tyler's chest tightened. Had he seen something? Heard something? He couldn't know for sure. By the time dawn's gray light seeped through the blinds, Tyler was still sitting on the couch, staring at the balcony door. His mind was raw from turning over the same questions. He didn't realize it yet, but the biggest mistake had already been made. Not in how he'd hidden her, not in the bleach or the fake whiskey scene, but in the fact that Angela had walked into that building alive and would never walk out again. Every camera, every neighbor, every timestamp was about to tell a story that would crush whatever flimsy lies he thought he could spin. And somewhere in the stillness, the faintest knock echoed from next door. The sound of a neighbor wondering why the woman they'd seen arrive yesterday hadn't been seen since. It started with a single phone call. At 9:12 a.m., the front desk of the Houston Police Department took a report from Janine Howard, Angela's best friend back in Georgia. Her voice was tight, urgent. She hadn't heard from Angela since yesterday afternoon, right after Angela texted to say she'd landed. That was unusual enough, but the last message Angela sent had been oddly short, not her normal chatty tone. Made it safe. Hanging with Tyler. No emojis. No details. And now, Angela wasn't answering calls. Dispatch logged it as a welfare check. By 10:30 a.m., officers Miguel Torres and Carling Nguyen were pulling into the lot of Tyler's apartment complex. Torres noted the security gate, the positioning of the building, and the angle of the cameras mounted above the entrances. Everything was the kind of environment where comings and goings were recorded whether tenants liked it or not. When Tyler opened the door, he looked like he'd just woken up. Sweatpants, hair mussed, a faint smell of stale whiskey in the air. "Yeah?" he asked, squinting into the morning light. Officer Nguyen explained they'd received a request to check on Angela Morris, who had been reported missing. Tyler's expression didn't shift much. If anything, it hardened. "She's not here," he said flatly. "We had an argument last night, and she left. Guess she went back to her hotel." "What hotel?" Torres asked. Tyler blinked once, too long. I don't remember the name. Downtown somewhere. She booked it herself." Nguyen took out a small notebook. "You mind if we come in and take a quick look around? Just to confirm she's not here." He hesitated, then stepped aside. "Sure, but you're wasting your time." The apartment was tidy, but not in a lived-in way. The couch cushions were too neatly placed, the kitchen counters wiped to a sterile shine. In the bedroom, the bed was made tight enough to bounce a quarter off it, but Torres noticed something on the carpet near the headboard, a faint discoloration, as if something had been scrubbed. He also spotted a single long hair on the pillowcase, dark brown, not matching Tyler's dirty blonde stubble. "Mind if we take a look at the balcony?" Torres asked. Tyler shrugged. "Go ahead." Nguyen slid the glass door open. The storage closet was partially blocked by a stack of paint cans. The smell of bleach hit her instantly. She glanced at Torres, then casually asked, "Do you keep cleaning supplies out here?" "Sometimes," Tyler said, not meeting her eyes. They didn't open the closet right then. No warrant, no cause, but the look they exchanged was enough to agree they'd be back. By that afternoon, detectives had taken over. Detective Laura Perez was lead. She was methodical, with a calm that unsettled suspects more than yelling ever could. The first thing she did was pull the building's security footage. Within minutes, she had a timeline. Angela arriving with Tyler at 3:46 p.m. yesterday. No footage of her leaving. Perez also subpoenaed cell phone records. Angela's phone had pinged the cell tower near Tyler's apartment at 7:18 p.m., the last activity before it went dark. Her plane ticket for Sunday's return flight was in use. When Perez and her partner came back with a warrant that evening, Tyler tried to play it cool. "Like I told the uniforms, she left. I don't know where she went." But as they began searching, his mask started to slip. The bedroom yielded the first real crack in his story. Luminol revealed faint splatter patterns on the wall behind the headboard, patterns invisible to the naked eye but glowing under the blue light. In the bathroom, they found a damp towel that reeked of bleach. And on the balcony, the storage closet door was blocked exactly as Nguyen had seen. When they moved the paint cans and opened it, the sight froze the entire room. Angela's body, wrapped in a blanket, bound with an orange extension cord. Her skin was pale, her neck mottled with deep bruises. The arrest was immediate. Tyler's hands shook as Perez cuffed him, but his voice stayed defiant. "You're making a mistake. She came at me first. I was just defending myself." Back at the station, the interrogation room's fluorescent lights hummed softly. Perez sat across from him, a manila folder in front of her. "Tyler, we've got security footage showing Angela came here and never left. We got her body in your storage closet. We got bleach on your hands, literally from the swabs we just took. You want to tell me again how this was self-defense?" He leaned back, eyes darting between her and the mirror behind her shoulder. She laughed at me. She wouldn't stop. She was going to tell people. You don't know what that does to a man. Perez didn't flinch. I know what choking someone until they can't breathe does to a woman. The forensic reports came fast. The autopsy confirmed cause of death as manual strangulation, with clear finger mark bruising on both sides of the neck. There were no defensive wounds consistent with Angela attacking first. Only deep bruises on her arms where she'd been grabbed, and faint abrasions on her knuckles, suggesting she'd try to pry his hands away. Angela's phone, found in Tyler's kitchen drawer, told its own story. Dozens of romantic messages, payment confirmations for money she'd sent him, and draft texts he'd typed but never sent after her death. Likely part of his aborted plan to fake her leaving. Neighbors were interviewed. One, the man with the grocery bag, recalled seeing Tyler on the balcony late at night, pacing. Another said she'd heard raised voices around 7 p.m., a man shouting, a woman's voice pleading. Piece by piece, the network of lies Tyler had tried to weave collapsed. His timeline didn't match phone records. His claim that she'd left on foot was demolished by the fact that her shoes were still in the apartment. Even his claim about the hotel booking fell apart when investigators found no reservation under her name anywhere in Houston. By the time the DA's office reviewed the case, it was airtight. Tyler Brooks was charged with first-degree murder, tampering with evidence, and abuse of corpse. He was denied bail. Perez took a quiet moment to call Janine, who broke down when she heard. "I told her to be careful," Janine sobbed. "I told her not to trust someone she'd never met in person. But she said he was different." Perez didn't say what she was thinking. That predators like Tyler always make themselves seem different, right up until the moment they show you who they really are. The trial of State of Texas versus Tyler Brooks drew more attention than anyone in Houston's criminal courthouse had seen in years. By the time jury selection began, every local news outlet had already run Angela Morris's photo, smiling in her navy dress at the airport, suitcase in hand, beside a mugshot of Tyler, eyes hollow, jaw clenched. The contrast was enough to stir outrage before a single piece of evidence was presented. Inside the packed courtroom, the air was heavy with tension. Angela's family sat in the front row, her daughter clutching a tissue, her son's arm wrapped protectively around her shoulders. Tyler's mother was there too, stone-faced, staring straight ahead as if she could will her son into innocence. The jurors, 12 strangers who would soon hold his fate, looked uneasy under the weight of so many eyes. The prosecution wasted no time. Assistant District Attorney Rachel King stood before the jury in her sharp navy suit, laying out the state's case. She painted Tyler as a manipulative predator who lured an older woman across state lines, exploited her financially, and killed her when she saw through his lies. This was not a crime of passion, she said firmly. This was about control. And when Angela Morris refused to play by his rules, Tyler Brooks decided she would not leave that apartment alive. King walked them through the timeline. Angela's arrival caught on security cameras, her disappearance with no footage of her leaving, the bleach-stained towels, the storage closet on the balcony. She held up crime scene photos, carefully, giving the family a chance to look away, showing the bruising on Angela's neck. These are not the marks of an accident, she told the jury. These are the fingerprints of murder. The defense, led by attorney Greg Whitfield, took a different tack. Whitfield was smooth, deliberate, addressing the jury with an almost fatherly tone. He didn't deny Angela was dead or that Tyler's hands were on her, but he claimed it was self-defense. According to their version, Angela had mocked Tyler in a deeply personal and humiliating way, and when she came at him, he reacted instinctively. This is not a man who set out to kill, Whitfield argued. This is a man who snapped after being provoked beyond reason. Witness after witness took the stand. Janine Howard testified about Angela's excitement before the trip and her sudden silence after landing. The building's maintenance worker identified Tyler as a tenant who'd been warned about storing things on his balcony, a detail the prosecution used to point out how unusual it was for him to have stacked up paint cans there that week. A neighbor recalled hearing a woman's voice say, "Please, just let me go the night Angela died." Then came Detective Laura Perez. Calm and methodical, she guided the jury through the evidence. Photos of the clean carpet that still showed traces of blood under luminol, the half-empty bleach bottle, Angela's phone found hidden in Tyler's kitchen drawer. She also revealed the damning digital trail, the money transfers from Angela to Tyler, and the unsent text messages on Angela's phone, clearly typed after the time of death. When it was time for the medical examiner, the courtroom seemed to hold its breath. Dr. Aaron Bell testified that Angela's cause of death was manual strangulation, sustained for at least 30 seconds, long enough for Tyler to have stopped if it were truly self-defense. This was not an instantaneous reaction, Bell said. This was a deliberate, sustained act. The most dramatic moment came when the prosecution played Tyler's recorded interview from the night of his arrest. On the big screen, the jury watched him lean back in the interrogation chair, shrugging as he said, "She laughed at me. She wouldn't stop. She was going to tell people. You don't know what that does to a man." The words hung in the air like a confession of motive. Whitfield tried to humanize Tyler during his own testimony. Tyler spoke about feeling insecure his whole life, about being abandoned by his father, about women who had mocked him in the past. He claimed Angela's reaction brought all that back, and that he just wanted her to stop. But on cross-examination, ADA King zeroed in. "You wanted her to stop breathing, didn't you?" she pressed. Tyler's jaw tightened, but he didn't answer. The silence was deafening. Closing arguments were a study in contrast. King's voice was steady, measured, but each word cut deep. Angela Morris came to Houston because she believed Tyler Brooks cared for her. She left in a blanket, bound with an extension cord. That's not self-defense. That's murder. Whitfield appealed to the jurors' empathy, suggesting that Tyler's outburst was a tragic, split-second mistake. He asked them to consider manslaughter instead of murder, framing the incident as the product of emotional provocation rather than premeditation. The jury deliberated for just under 5 hours. When they returned, the courtroom was silent except for the creak of chairs as everyone leaned forward. The foreman's voice was steady. "We, the jury, find the defendant, Tyler Brooks, guilty of murder in the first degree." Angela's daughter let out a sob, clutching her brother. Tyler's mother shook her head, whispering no under her breath. Tyler himself stared straight ahead, his face blank, as if the verdict hadn't landed yet. The judge sentenced him to life in prison without the possibility of parole. As the deputies moved in to escort him out, Tyler finally looked back toward Angela's family. Whatever he meant to say stayed behind his teeth. The only sound was the clink of the cuffs and the shuffle of his steps as he disappeared through the side door, leaving behind a courtroom heavy with both grief and relief. The courthouse steps were crowded with cameras when Angela's family emerged, their faces pale and exhausted. The sun was dipping low, casting a warm glow that felt almost offensive in the wake of what had just happened inside. Her daughter, Jessica, held a framed photo of Angela, the same picture the media had used for months, smiling in that navy dress on the day she left Georgia. The wind caught Jessica's hair, and for a second, she looked so much like her mother it made people in the crowd swallow hard. "This verdict doesn't bring her back," Jessica said into the cluster of microphones, her voice breaking. "But it does mean the man who took her from us will never hurt anyone else." Her brother, David, stood beside her, his jaw clenched, one hand on her shoulder. They didn't take questions. They just walked away, slipping into a waiting car, leaving the chaos behind. Inside the prison processing unit, Tyler Brooks was fingerprinted, photographed, and stripped of anything that made him Tyler Brooks. His clothes were replaced with a standard-issue jumpsuit, his hands cuffed for transport. As the door to the holding cell clanged shut, he stared at the floor, jaw tight, still muttering under his breath that it wasn't supposed to be like this. In the months that followed, he would refuse interviews, never filing an appeal, never admitting guilt. The case reverberated far beyond Houston. National news outlets picked it up, calling it the 12-hour murder. True crime podcasts dissected every detail. How a man could build months of trust online only to end it in violence within hours of meeting face-to-face. Relationship safety groups used Angela's story as a cautionary tale, holding seminars on online dating risks, the dangers of traveling alone to meet someone for the first time, and the red flags that often get ignored. Back in Macon, Georgia, Angela's home became a shrine of sorts. Friends and neighbors left flowers on her porch, cards tucked under the welcome mat, candles burning at dusk. Janine, her best friend, started a small nonprofit in her name, Angela's Light, dedicated to helping women verify online identities before meeting in person. She kept Angela's favorite mug on her desk at the office, a quiet reminder of the woman whose laughter used to fill her kitchen on lazy Sunday mornings. The online dating app where Angela met Tyler came under fire, too. Critics accused it of lax verification, pointing out that Tyler's profile pictures weren't even him. The company issued a statement expressing condolences and promising stronger security measures. But for those who knew Angela, it felt hollow, like locking the door after the intruder was already inside. In Houston, Detective Laura Perez moved on to other cases, but she kept Angela's file in her desk, the edges worn from months of handling. She didn't talk about it often, but when she did, she'd say Angela reminded her of her own aunt, kind, trusting, the sort of person who believed people meant what they said. "That's the thing about trust," she told a rookie once. "Once someone gives it to you, you have the power to protect it or destroy it." Tyler destroyed it. Angela's funeral had been months earlier, but the memory still sat raw in the minds of those who loved her. The small church overflowed with people, the scent of lilies heavy in the air. A slideshow of her life played on the wall. Angela as a young mother, Angela laughing with friends, Angela holding her first grandchild. Each image was a reminder of the decades stolen in those 12 hours. Life went on, but there was a shadow where she used to be. Jessica still caught herself reaching for the phone to text her mom about little things, the weather, a new recipe, before the reality would hit again. David kept her old garden blooming, planting the same flowers she loved each spring. And somewhere in a Texas prison cell, Tyler Brooks lived out the consequences of that one violent night. There were no more curated photos, no adoring texts, no one calling him cowboy, just concrete walls, the clang of metal doors, and the knowledge that the world outside only remembered him for what he'd done. Angela's story didn't end in that apartment in Houston. It kept rippling outward, touching strangers, changing how people thought about trust, about travel, about the thin line between charm and danger. In her hometown, the street where she lived was renamed Morris Way, a quiet stretch lined with maple trees. At the dedication ceremony, Jessica said only one thing before placing a single white rose at the base of the sign. She believed in love. I just wish love had believed in her. And for a long moment, the crowd stood in silence, the sound of leaves rustling in the Georgia breeze, carrying the weight of everything that had been lost.